Between January and April 2025, the Nigerian government, through the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, sold over 9.2 million barrels of crude oil valued at 219.38 billion naira to Dangote Petroleum Refinery. The crude was supplied under the evolving naira-for-crude model with exchange rates ranging from 1,501 to 1,563 to the dollar. Officials say this approach strengthens domestic refining and reduces forex pressure, but analysts warn the trade-off may be weakening dollar inflows, concentrating refining power and disrupting federal revenue distribution. These concerns arise as Nigeria's external reserves dipped to $32.2 billion. In fact, dollar disbursement fell by over 40% in early 2025, according to data released. We have Bola Olojede, oil and gas analyst, joining us now for the conversation. It's a pleasure to have you in, Bola.
Thank you.
Yes, so I mean, let's begin with some sort of assessment of how the government is balancing its strategy on boosting local refining capacity and also maintaining FX earnings through exports. How, especially with this deal on ground and the relationship with Dangote, how are they able, or have they been able to properly balance that relationship?
Okay. They've been able to provide some level of crude to Dangote, but the reality is that the level of crude being provided right now is still very low to the requirements to run a refinery the size of Dangote Refinery. We're talking of a refinery with 650,000 barrels per day capacity. When you look at some of the provisions that the government has made in this year. So you might see some months in which the government made maybe 1 million barrels. Let's even say it becomes double and it is 2 million barrels. If Dangote is operating at full capacity and can consume a feedstock of 650,000 barrels per day, if you give him 1 million barrels, you've only given him maybe 1.5 day stock. If you give him 2 million, maybe you're lucky if you can get maybe 3 days feedstock out of the 3 million that you have given him in a month. So it looks big when you look at the numbers, naira, 219 billion over 4 months. But when you translate it to dollars, to barrels, and you place it side by side with the capacity of the refinery to consume 650,000 barrels a day at full capacity, then it is a trickle. It doesn't cut it at all. Now, the way, in my opinion, is to actually, push the lever on those things that will help us to improve our production level. When production expands, we will have more to give to local refiners, and we will also have more to export and add to government revenue when we do that. But as it is today, the production the production level does not cut it. We're not quite there.
So you're saying that Dangote isn't getting enough fuel, right, from the local NNPC?
It's too tiny.
Because we're not producing enough?
Yeah, it's too small.
The reason?
Yes.
Right.
We're not producing enough. That amount we are allocating to Dangote has been increasing. But when you look at even what is the highest level that we gave him, it is still too tiny.
Interesting data then. Hopefully we see production being ramped up. Of course, a large part of Dangote's crude that he's refining comes from, WTI Midland grade. Now, the federal government has allocated over 219.38 billion worth of crude to the refinery, as you have pointed out, in just 4 months. 9.2 million barrels, involved. Would you say that this signals real progress towards cutting Nigeria's 6 trillion annual fuel imports bill, or is it more symbolic than it is actually structural?
I think it's a show of commitment. If you watch the numbers, you'll see how it has grown over the months, and it has continued to grow. So it's a show of commitment on the part of the government. But because, like they say, it is always difficult to share two chicken laps among three elders. That is the real case that we have at hand. If the total pool that you have to allocate from is not even enough, there's a limit to how much you can allocate. That is the reality. You can see the growth from 17 in January to 111 billion naira worth by April. That is a significant growth and is a show of commitment. But there is a limit to how much you can allocate because you are constrained by the total production that is available to be allocated in the first instance. So in the medium term, or even in the short to medium term, we need to continue to gas down on those levers that will help us improve production generally so that we can allocate more to local refining. If we don't allocate to them, there are implications, to that. At the end of the day, they have to import. If they are importing, they will also be demanding for dollars to import. So it's a catch-22. If you don't allocate, they have to import. And when they are importing, they will put pressure on dollars. They have to use dollars to do the importation. Mm. So if you allocate to them, we are saying that the pressure, their own demand pressure for dollars will be reduced or cut dramatically. And that therefore that should help our balance of trade, our foreign exchange stability, as it were. Mm. And then if they produce, and they produce more than we can consume as a country, they will be able to export. When they export, we will earn foreign exchange from their export activities. So it will improve our dollar supply and help our exchange rate stability.
Mm. I mean, those are long-term projections and, still ambitions. But in the immediate, there are questions. While it appears we're putting Dangote at the center of this conversation, his refinery, there are people who are assessing in the immediate the opportunity cost, right, that it's having for us and our export earnings, considering oil accounts for 80% of Nigeria's export earnings. So can you touch on that a bit, the opportunity cost of this deal in the immediate?
Like I said, it's a catch-22 thing, and it's not even a long-term issue we're talking about now. The refinery that has the capacity for 650,000 barrels is not under construction. It is sitting right here in Nigeria. If that refinery is able to produce to the maximum capacity possible, then the chances are that we will produce more than we need, and we will export and earn foreign exchange. So it will also help the supply of foreign exchange if it's able to produce at the right level. And that situation is not something that needs to happen in the future or in the long or medium term. It is here with us because that capacity is here with us. All we need to do is provide the feedstock that could support that process to operate optimally.
And that supply will only be boosted by boosting local production, from what you have said. But just for some clarity, is Dangote the sole beneficiary of this naira-for-crude initiative? We have 25 licensed modular private refineries. Are they part of this crude supply scheme, or it's just for Dangote? And if it is, are there risks entrenched in a monopoly in local refining?
It's also for other refiners. There are a number of them that are in operation as we speak, but he has the largest capacity of all these people. So some of them, you have Arabelle, you have Walter Smith. There are a number of them out there, and this scheme is also for all of them. But what is clear is that the 650,000 barrels per day capacity is huge and make all the other ones to be minuscule. In comparison, the power in comparison. The fear about monopoly is a real fear. And unfortunately, what could have helped us to mitigate that more easily is not rising up to the occasion. And that would have been the public refineries. So I can imagine the two Port Harcourt refineries working, Warri Refinery working, Kaduna Refinery working. Those refineries have fairly large capacity. If you put it all together, it comes to about 450 thereabout, 1,000 barrels per day. Those are the kind of things that could help to mitigate the monopolistic effect of a behemoth such as Dangote. But those refineries, apparently, I'm not sure Kaduna is not completed. Worry was reported by certain mainstream media recently that it was a failure. You know, that's over $1 billion investment probably down the drain. The Port Harcourt that worked for a bit, maybe it was, blending, fuel or blending crude. It's said to also, not producing again. It has to undergo some further refurbishment. So overall, that 420,000 or 450,000 barrels per day that could have helped to mitigate the monopolistic effect is not there. It's not working as we are. So we now have to rely on the regulator in that industry to be able to help moderate what will have been, the capitalistic tendency that may hurt the system by virtue of monopoly. However, importation is also there to moderate this effect. And as far as I know, the NNPC has continued to import fuel despite Dangote. So that is also an alternative source, a source of moderation of the monopolistic power of the Dangote Refinery.
All right. You have highlighted several, initiatives and several things that need to be done within that sector, increasing production, encouraging the role of regulators as well in mitigating the monopolistic tendencies of the industry, having more refineries on stream. But aside from that, how else do you think the government can balance national energy security with private sector dominance? What other strategies does the government need to, and even the regulators as well, need to take up?
Well, I would say the government needs to walk away a little bit more from the opaque approach to a lot of things with oil and gas. NNPC has not been very transparent in most of their affairs. Maybe now with the new board, we will expect to begin to see more transparency, and then NNPC in itself will be on a track to gathering what is required to commercialize or to privatize, to take NNPCL to the market in itself. Now, as NNPC Limited coming to the market, selling shares to Nigerians and properly and professionally run, it will help tremendously the industry in terms of managing monopoly issues, as well as expanding the capacity of what is possible. There are many other countries like us, and when you see the equivalent of the national oil company, if you talk about Saudi Aramco, for example, or the Petrobras in Brazil, we know what those guys are doing. So with the new board of NNPC, we are hopeful that maybe they can take us on that track to be an Aramco of tomorrow, a Petrobras of tomorrow that will excel in that space, and that will further help not only to expand opportunities in that space, but to also moderate monopolistic pressures that could emerge by virtue of behemoths such as the Dangote Refinery.
Indeed, and of course, national interest is the center of this conversation. Finally, it's also been reported that some of Dangote's refined diesel has reportedly been exported, despite Nigeria's local shortages, and prices are reaching highs of 1,200 per liter. Is there any tracking or quota mechanism in place that will prioritize domestic market supply before exports?
Well, the diesel market is totally has been exposed to open market activities for a long time. So all the subsidy issues and all the rest have been taken away a long time ago. And the beauty of diesel is that every Tom, Dick, and Harry could produce diesel. So the people that are boiling crude in the Niger Delta, they can produce diesel. The modular refineries that are more structured, they can produce diesel. It's a bit different from production of PMS, which requires certain level of investment and technical capacity, to do that. So I don't think diesel is a major issue from the perspective of production, because it is available to be produced with little effort and by so many players in the industry. Where we have had problems is PMS production, which requires a lot more investment, all the catalytic converter and the rest of them to produce. But if we think that there is something that could help pricing by dedicating certain production to the local market, then the regulator is there to step in that place and ensure that local market will also have the right level of supply. But we have to be careful so that we're not seen as impeding business that should be open to the market to determine. But if there are issues that constitute fleecing of the public, the regulator needs to step in and ensure that the right is done in the best interest of Nigerians.
I mean, the ball is back in the court of the regulator. Definitely a delicate situation to be managed, and hopefully we see them do so. But finally, I know I said the previous question was final, but let's have this now. Going forward, as the government seeks to create some sort of balance, do you think future crude supply deals should be tied to social and economic KPIs like pricing caps, job creation, fuel availability, especially in the underserved regions, right? So that we can somewhat justify this public investment and policy supports that's involved here.
ESG has become more popular than it used to be some years ago. And literally all organizations are now declaring their own ESG initiative, environment, social, and governance. And everybody is speaking to that. So whether you are a Dangote or you are an Aradel or wherever you are as a player, you are compelled to pay attention to the ESG side of things as you operate. And the same will go for NNPC as well. So again, the regulator has a huge role to play here. The private sector, these are capitalists, they want to make money. There must be that agency that try to, compel them to behave in the right way as far as implementation of ESG related initiative is concerned. The Petroleum Industry Act also has its own provisions that support ESG. And the regulator, once again, has a duty to ensure that the act is obeyed to the letter.
Indeed, and hopefully we see them do just that. Thank you so much for your time and your perspective to this conversation. Bola Olojede, oil and gas analyst.